I matched with a woman on Bumble last spring, and even now I can't say for sure who I almost ended up meeting that night. On the app, her name was Rachel. Nothing about her profile screamed fake. Her photos looked normal, like the kind you'd see from anyone you might actually run into at a coffee shop. Cute brunette, marketing job, into hiking. We messaged back and forth for a few days, and she came across as pretty genuine. No creepy comments, no rushing, no weird energy. If anything, she seemed calm and patient, like she wasn't trying to force anything. After a bunch of matches that felt like a speed run to nowhere, it was honestly kind of refreshing. After about a week, we picked a night to meet for dinner. It was a Wednesday. She chose the restaurant somewhere in a quieter part of town, a little nicer than my usual spots, but not fancy enough to feel out of place. I got there, parked, and texted her that I'd arrived. Nothing. At first, I didn't think much of it. I stood near the entrance, checking my phone, trying to look casual. 5 minutes, 10. I told myself she was probably dealing with traffic or struggling to find parking. At around 20 minutes, I sent another message saying I was inside by the hostess stand. I could feel my face getting warm with embarrassment, like everyone could tell I'd been left hanging. The hostess asked if I wanted to be seated, and I told her I was waiting for someone. She looked at her list and said nobody had checked in under the name Rachel. That little detail made my stomach tighten. I kept telling myself it didn't mean anything. Maybe Rachel hadn't arrived yet. Maybe she planned to meet me outside first. By the time it hit around 30 minutes, I'd pretty much decided I was done. I was about to head out when a guy walked in and came straight toward me like he already knew exactly where I'd be. He looked mid-40s, scruffy, heavier build, black hoodie. The kind of guy you wouldn't think twice about seeing at a gas station at midnight, but you also wouldn't feel relaxed if he suddenly got too close. He stopped right in front of me and asked if I was Jake. That threw me off immediately because my name wasn't on any reservation. I hadn't given it to the hostess. I hadn't said it out loud. I hesitated, then said, "Yeah." He told me he was Rachel's brother. He said she wasn't feeling great, but she still wanted to meet. According to him, she didn't want to cancel on me, and since they lived nearby, she asked him to come pick me up and bring me over. He said it like it was a completely normal plan, like this was something people did all the time. Right away, it felt wrong. Not horror movie wrong, just off. My first question was why she hadn't told me herself. He didn't get defensive. He said her phone died and she didn't want to bail on the date. His voice stayed calm and polite, like he'd practiced saying it. I remember looking at his hoodie, at the way he stood, close enough to steer the conversation, not close enough to be openly threatening. I asked where she lived. He said only a few blocks away, and added that driving would be better because the sidewalks were icy. That small detail was weirdly specific. I stood there weighing it in my head. Part of me felt guilty, like I'd be a jerk if I refused, and she really was sick and embarrassed. But the bigger part of me kept repeating the same thought. None of this is normal. I told him I could just walk. I asked for the address. He didn't give it. He said it would make more sense if he just led me there. That was the moment my body reacted before my brain fully caught up, like a drop in my stomach, like something inside me was trying to pull the brakes. I told him I'd rather reschedule and started moving toward the door. He shifted into my path, not in a dramatic way. No shove, no sudden aggression, just enough to block me without making a scene. He said Rachel would be upset, and that she specifically wanted him to bring me. I told him I'd message her later. He held my gaze for a few seconds without blinking much. Then he stepped aside and told me to have a good night, but the way he said it didn't feel friendly. It felt like the kind of sentence that carries an unspoken second meaning. I didn't wait around to figure out what it was. I got out of the restaurant fast and went straight to my car. The second I sat down, I hit the lock button like it mattered. As I backed out, I saw him outside, standing there and watching me leave. He didn't wave. He didn't look confused. He just stared, like he was making sure I was really going. On the drive home, I tried to talk myself down. Maybe it was just a weird family dynamic. Maybe Rachel really had sent her brother, and it came off awkward. Maybe I was overreacting. Around 11 that night, my phone buzzed. It was a Bumble message from Rachel's profile. She asked why I didn't come. I told her what happened, that a guy showed up, said he was her brother, told me she was sick, and wanted me brought to her place. She replied immediately, and that reply hit me harder than I expected. She said she didn't have a brother. For a second, I just sat there staring at my screen, rereading it like it would change. I typed back, explaining everything in detail. After that, she stopped responding. I figured she was freaked out too, or confused, or maybe she thought I was lying. I tried to sleep, but I couldn't get comfortable. My brain kept replaying the moment he stepped in front of the door. Every time I started to drift off, I'd wake up and check my phone again. Sometime around 1 a.m., I started getting notifications, one after another, that someone was attempting to log into my email, then my bank app, then my Instagram. All within minutes. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I changed passwords, turned on every security option I could find, and sat there with my phone glowing in the dark like it was the only thing keeping me safe. At first, I didn't even connect the login attempts to the restaurant. My brain kept trying to separate it all into different problems, like that would make it less serious. The next morning, I checked Bumble to see if Rachel had replied. Her profile was gone, completely deleted. Around noon, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. The message was short. I should have gone with him. I showed it to my roommate. He told me to block the number and report it. I did. But it didn't end there. New numbers started texting me. Different area codes, different lines, all with the same tone. Short, vague, and slightly threatening. Stuff like they'd seen me. Stuff about not wasting their time. Stuff about me making it harder for myself. Then one message came through that made my hands go cold. It used my full legal name, the one I don't use on dating apps. Not Jake. My real name. I didn't reply to any of them. That night, I was home alone, sitting on the couch with the TV on low. I'd started jumping at every little sound, so I kept the volume down to listen to the building. That's when someone knocked on my apartment door. I froze. I remember holding my breath like I could make myself invisible. After a few seconds of silence, there was another knock, harder this time. I thought about calling the police, but my brain kept arguing with itself. It had only been 2 knocks. What would I even say? Someone knocked and I got scared. I forced myself up, walked quietly to the door, and looked through the peephole. No one. The hallway was empty. I stepped back, standing there in the dark, waiting for the next sound. After a moment, I heard heavy footsteps moving away, heading down the stairs. The next day, I called the restaurant. I told them I was trying to track down a man who'd been there around the time I was, and described him. I asked if anyone fitting that description had checked in, had a reservation, anything. They said no. Then I asked if they'd noticed anyone lingering outside, maybe watching the entrance, waiting around. The hostess told me one of their servers had actually mentioned a man in a hoodie pacing outside for close to an hour before I even showed up. They assumed he was waiting for someone, but he never came in until he walked straight to me. I didn't tell her anything else. I thanked her and hung up, and I just sat there thinking about that hour, about how long he'd been out there, watching the doors, waiting for me to arrive like it was scheduled. I contacted the local police and gave them the first number that texted me. They couldn't trace it to anyone useful, and since technically nothing had happened, no assault, no break-in, they told me there wasn't much they could do. So I did what I could. I deleted Bumble, I changed my phone number, I updated every password again, and tightened security on everything. For about a week, things went quiet. No texts, no knocks, no login attempts. I started to breathe again, even though I still felt on edge. Then one night, when I took the trash out behind my apartment building, I noticed something tucked under the dumpster handle, like someone had slid it there on purpose. It was a folded piece of paper with my name on it. My hands were shaking when I opened it. Inside was a printed photo of me from the night of the date. It was me standing in the restaurant lobby looking down at my phone. The angle was from outside, through a window, like the person taking it had been watching from the street the entire time. On the back, someone had written one word, "You." I don't think I slept more than a couple hours a night for days after that. I started staying at friends' places whenever I could. I flinched at footsteps in hallways, at car doors outside, at any unexpected sound. Even when nothing happened, it felt like something was waiting for the right moment to show itself again. A few days later, I checked the dumpster area again, and there was nothing. No new note, no message, just normal trash and silence. Eventually, the texts stopped too. Or maybe they didn't stop, they just stopped letting me know they were there. The only thing I'm sure of is this: the guy I met that night wasn't Rachel's brother, because Rachel wasn't real. Someone built that profile from nothing. Someone created a person that didn't exist just to get someone to agree to a meeting in a specific place, at a specific time. Someone expected me to leave that restaurant with them. And the part that still bothers me the most is how close I came to doing it, just because I didn't want to seem rude. I haven't used a dating app since. Every time I think about that night, I get this sick feeling that I was supposed to vanish. And the only reason I didn't is because I listened to my gut right when it mattered. I still don't know who that man was, and I don't think I ever will. After I turned 30 back in January, I started feeling really tired of being single. I hadn't been in a serious relationship in years, and it was starting to get to me more than I wanted to admit. I'd always avoided online dating because I didn't like the idea of meeting someone through an app, but eventually I got to the point where I figured I should at least try. So I downloaded Hinge. For the first few days, it was exactly what you'd expect. I got a handful of matches, a few short conversations, and then everything fizzled out before it ever turned into plans. Nothing about it felt real. It was more like people killing time. Then one Monday night, I was at home watching hockey when I got a notification saying I matched with a girl named Rebecca. Her profile didn't look sketchy. She had multiple pictures that seemed normal. One of her at work, a short clip of her and some friends at a bar playing darts. Another photo at an outdoor concert, and a simple selfie where it was just her face. It all looked consistent, like a real person with a real life. I thought she was really attractive, so I sent her a message. Pretty quickly, we got into a good conversation. We talked about what we did for work, what we liked doing outside of it, the usual stuff. She didn't have that weird, fake energy some profiles have, where every reply feels copied and pasted. She seemed easy to talk to. Normal. After a bit, I asked if she'd want to meet up that Friday at a local arcade bar. She didn't answer right away. Hours went by. I figured she'd either lost interest or just wasn't checking the app. Then, around 1 o'clock in the morning, she finally replied and said yes. Once we set the plan, I expected at least a little conversation leading up to it, but after that, she went completely quiet. 4 days passed with nothing. No follow-up, no looking forward to it, no confirmation. It was so silent that I started to wonder if she'd even show. Then, literally 30 minutes before we were supposed to meet, she messaged me. It was short and oddly stiff, basically just saying she was on her way and that it was the time we agreed on. That was it. I drove over to the arcade bar, and the first thing that hit me was how empty it looked. This was a Friday night at about 8 p.m., and there were only 2 cars in the entire parking lot. It didn't make sense. That place was usually at least a little busy on weekends. I pulled into a spot close to the front entrance, right along the side of the building. I put the car in park, and I swear I hadn't even had time to take my seatbelt off when my phone buzzed again. It was Rebecca. She said she was having car trouble and that she had parked on the other side of the bar. That made my stomach drop a little because I knew what was back there. The other side wasn't another row of parking or a second entrance. It was basically dumpsters and a fence, and beyond that was just woods. There wasn't really a reason for anyone to be back there, and it didn't even make sense how she'd end up parking behind the building unless she went out of her way to do it. I tried calling her immediately. The call rang once, and then it went straight to voicemail. I hung up, and almost right away, Another message came through from her, telling me to come around back and help her with her car. The second I read it, I could feel my whole body getting tense. My heart started doing that thing where it beats too hard and you suddenly become aware of how quiet your car is. I looked out through the windshield at the front of the bar, then glanced at the side mirrors like I was expecting something to move. I didn't know what to do because part of me still wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation, but the bigger part of me kept repeating the same thought. This doesn't feel right. I texted her back, saying it didn't feel right and that I was leaving. Even as I sent it, I remember thinking how awkward that sounded, like it was something you'd only say in a situation you couldn't fully explain, but I didn't know what else to say. And I didn't want to step out of my car. I put the car in reverse and started backing out. As I was pulling toward the exit of the lot, right before I turned out onto the road, I saw movement near the corner of the building. Two men came running out from behind the bar straight toward my car. They were wearing ski masks. I didn't see any weapons in their hands, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to sit there long enough to find out what they had or what they planned to do. I slammed the gas and peeled out of the parking lot, not even thinking about the speed limit, just trying to put distance between me and that place as fast as possible. I drove all the way back to my apartment without stopping, checking my mirrors way more than I normally would, expecting headlights to appear behind me. When I finally got home and parked, my hands were shaking. My throat felt tight, like I'd been holding my breath for the entire drive. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen in the moment. There was a huge dent on the top of my trunk, like something heavy had slammed into it. It looked like one of them had thrown a big rock at my car as I took off. The scary part was I hadn't even registered the impact while it happened. I didn't remember hearing it. I didn't remember feeling it. That's how scared I was. I called the police and told them everything. Hinge, the date, the texts, the empty parking lot, the message about the back of the building, the masked guys running at my car, and the damage to my trunk. They took the report, but it was one of those situations where there wasn't much they could actually do. No plate number, no clear description beyond two guys in masks, and the profile itself didn't give them anything real to track. They said they'd let me know if anything came up, but I never heard anything after that. Strangely, the whole thing didn't completely scare me off dating apps. I think my brain just convinced itself it was a freak situation. Like lightning striking, something that probably wouldn't happen twice, but it did change how I handle it now. I'm a lot more careful about meeting anyone from an app, and I don't just show up somewhere because a profile tells me to. I make sure I talk to them on the phone or FaceTime first, because after that night, I learned how easy it is for someone to look real on a screen, and how fast a normal Friday night can turn into something else. I can still picture that stretch of 2024 so clearly, it's uncomfortable. The city felt sticky at night, our condo felt smaller by the week, and there was this constant pressure sitting in my chest because my board exam was getting closer. I was living in a small place in the city with 3 friends, and every day looked the same. Review packets, practice questions, flashcards, and those quiet little moments where you realize you're barely holding it together and you pretend it's just a coffee break. Like a lot of stressed out 20-somethings who are stuck between responsibility and burnout, I decided the smartest way to distract myself was to get involved with someone new. That's when I met him. I'll call him Michael. I don't know if it was boredom, loneliness, or the fact that my brain was fried from studying, but I was drawn in almost immediately. At the start, he was charming in a controlled way, calm, funny. He replied quickly, but not so quickly that it felt desperate. It was like he had the perfect rhythm down, interested but relaxed. We started talking every day. Then it turned into every night. And before I really stopped to think about it, it felt like we were dating. Or at least something close enough that my mind treated it like it was real. In the beginning, Michael checked all the boxes you'd want someone to check. He was respectful. He listened. He could actually hold a conversation without turning everything into a joke or a complaint. We'd stay on calls for hours while I lay on my thin condo mattress, staring up at the ceiling, letting his voice fill the room while the rest of the apartment stayed quiet. There was only one thing that felt strange early on, and I ignored it longer than I should have. He wouldn't show his face on our calls. He had an explanation ready. He said his phone had been stolen and the laptop he was using didn't have a working camera. I accepted it at first because I wanted to. It sounded inconvenient, but not impossible. Still, as time went on, little warning signs started appearing, like notifications you keep swiping away because you don't want to read them. The biggest one was how fast his tone would shift the second the conversation got even slightly intimate. It was like a switch. Out of nowhere, he'd start pushing for explicit pictures. Not sometimes, not occasionally. Every single time the topic drifted in that direction, he tried. I shut it down firmly, every time. I told him I wasn't comfortable with that, especially over the internet. I thought being clear would end it. It didn't. We started arguing about it in this exhausting loop. He'd push. I'd say no. He'd get moody. Sometimes he'd apologize and act like he understood. Other times he'd go quiet and sulk like I'd wronged him. And then, the next day, he'd ask again, like the argument never happened. It started to feel less like a misunderstanding and more like he was testing how many times he could wear me down. Even with all of that, I still wanted to meet him in person. Part of it was curiosity, and part of it was me trying to prove to myself that I wasn't just getting attached to a voice through a screen. I kept thinking that if we met face to face, everything would make sense. But every time I suggested meeting up, he had a reason it couldn't happen. He had errands. He was busy. He didn't feel good. His schedule was packed. He wasn't in the city. Something came up with family. An emergency. And the most common answer was always some version of soon. Soon, soon, soon. Until soon started to feel like a word that didn't mean anything. Somewhere between the late night calls, the constant excuses, the non-stop pressure for pictures, and the growing unease in my stomach, something shifted in me. I started feeling like there was something wrong with Michael, and I felt it long before I was willing to admit it out loud. My friends had been saying it for weeks. Anytime he avoided meeting up again, anytime he repeated the story about the broken camera, anytime he pushed for explicit photos while refusing to show even part of his face, I'd catch my friends exchanging that look people share when they don't want to embarrass you, but they're also losing patience. One night, we were all in the living room reviewing, and one of them asked me directly if he really never showed himself on video, not even briefly. Another friend followed up right away, asking if I'd ever seen his face at all during a call. I shrugged and gave them the same explanation I'd repeated a dozen times. Stolen phone, broken laptop camera. They stared at me like I'd just told them I believed in something ridiculous. One of them said my name gently, Marie, and told me that if he genuinely wanted to see me, he would figure it out. She said even old laptops usually have cameras, and if his didn't, there were 100 other ways. The way she said it made my stomach twist. Because I already knew she was right. Deep down, I felt it too. But I kept defending him anyway. I told myself he wouldn't call me every day if he didn't care. I told myself he was dealing with something personal. I kept holding on to the version of him he wanted me to believe in. Then December came, just a few weeks before Christmas. With this stupid mix of hope and denial swirling in my chest, I invited him to come over and meet my family, to spend Christmas with us. I expected another excuse. I expected him to stall, but he sounded excited immediately. He agreed without hesitation. For the first time, I let myself relax. I pictured it like a movie scene. Christmas morning, a cheesy introduction, my family meeting my boyfriend, and this feeling that everything weird from the past months would finally be worth it. I really believed I was about to get a fresh start. And then, the day before we were supposed to meet, it all collapsed. I remember sitting on the couch in the condo, flipping through flashcards when he called. His breathing sounded wrong, uneven, shaky. At first, I thought he was stressed, maybe overwhelmed. Then I realized he was crying. He asked if we could talk, but it came out almost like a whisper. The second I heard it, my whole body went cold. The tone didn't match anything I'd heard from him before. He took a long time to get the words out. He kept pausing, like he was trying to decide how much he could admit. When he finally said it, it felt like getting punched in the stomach. He told me he'd been catfishing me. All of it. The photos weren't him. They were stolen from an influencer, someone from Indonesia. He admitted, someone he'd been pretending to be. His name wasn't real, his job story wasn't real, his background wasn't real. He lied about basically everything. My head started spinning so hard I thought I was going to throw up. I remember my skin crawling, like my body was trying to reject the moment. It was like watching a mask come off that I hadn't even known was there. And then, like the situation needed one more twist of the knife, he sent me a picture of what he actually looked like. He claimed he'd been honest about his age, that he really was 24, but the photo didn't match that at all. I've seen guys in their late 30s who looked younger than the face he showed me. That was when every single detail from the past months suddenly snapped into place. The pressure for explicit photos, the anger when I refused, the way he dodged meeting, the constant excuses, knowing what he actually looked like made his behavior feel so much worse, like he'd been trying to get something from me while hiding behind a stolen identity the entire time. I told him I was done. I told him I wanted to end it. That's when he changed again. He lashed out and accused me of being shallow, like I was just like everyone else, like I only liked him because of the attractive pictures he'd used. It was surreal. He had lied to me, manipulated me, deceived me from the beginning, and somehow he was turning it around like I was the problem. He went on and on. He blamed me, then apologized, then begged. It was like he ran through every angle of emotional manipulation in the span of half an hour. I cried during parts of it, not because I missed him, but because it felt humiliating to realize how long I'd defended something that wasn't real. And then he said the most unhinged thing of all. He begged me to still let him come stay with my family on Christmas. He said he'd already told his parents he wouldn't be home, and he had nowhere else to go. I remember staring at my phone like it was glitching, like maybe I'd misread it, but I hadn't. I refused. I muted him. I ignored the messages. I blocked numbers as they came in. I didn't let his chaos bleed into the holiday, and I did have a peaceful Christmas with my family, the kind I genuinely needed after months of stress and that final gut punch. If it had ended there, it would have just been a gross lesson and an embarrassing story. But Michael didn't accept the breakup. He didn't fade out quietly. He didn't stay gone. For almost a year after that, life felt normal again. I focused on myself, my hobbies, my friends. I started using Instagram again, something I'd stopped doing when I was dealing with the emotional fallout of his lies. I started posting selfies, little life updates, even some cosplay photos I was proud of. It felt good to be online without feeling like someone was hovering over me. The one thing I didn't think about was the fact that Michael and I still followed each other. It didn't even cross my mind until it was too late. One night, after I posted a few stories, nothing dramatic, just a selfie and a behind-the-scenes clip from a new cosplay, I got a message request notification. It was from him. Just seeing his name made this cold, crawling feeling move up my spine. I didn't open it. I didn't even want to read the preview. I locked my phone and tossed it aside like it could burn me. I tried to ignore it, but the notifications kept coming. Every few hours, another message. Eventually, I got so fed up that I opened the chat, thinking I'd just block him and be done with it. The second I did, my entire body went numb. He had sent a photo taken just minutes earlier of the front of my house. My parents weren't home. It felt like the air got pulled out of my lungs. My hands started moving on autopilot. I checked the locks, locked every door again, even though they already were, and ran upstairs. I shut my bedroom door and locked it too. Then I called the police. While I was on the phone trying to keep my voice steady, I heard knocking. Then it turned into pounding. He was outside yelling my name. He kept begging me to open the door so we could talk. But his voice didn't sound like the calm, funny guy from the calls. It sounded desperate and unstable, like he'd been building up to this for a long time. I crouched beside my bed, with my phone clutched so tightly my hand hurt, trying not to make a sound while the dispatcher walked me through it, telling me to stay inside, stay hidden, stay on the line. It felt like hours, even though it was probably only minutes. We lived close to a police station, and I'm still grateful for that. I eventually heard footsteps outside, then an officer's voice shouting something, and then, finally, silence. They arrested him. When officers came to the door to check on me, I unlocked it with shaking hands. My whole body felt weak, like I'd been running even though I'd barely moved. The officer talking to me looked dead serious. And then he told me something that made my stomach drop all over again. Michael had a knife on him. I had to grab the door frame to keep myself steady. I couldn't stop thinking about what that meant because none of the possibilities were comforting. Whether he planned to scare me, hurt me, or do something else entirely, it didn't matter. The fact that he came to my house like that was enough. After that, I had no choice but to tell my parents everything. Every lie he told, every excuse I accepted, every warning sign I ignored. They were angry, of course. They scolded me for trusting someone online and for keeping it from them. But underneath that, I could see how relieved they were that I was alive. My mom hugged me so tightly it felt like she was trying to anchor me in place. Even now, whenever I think back to the officer saying he had a knife, I get chills because it reminds me how close I came to finding out what Michael was really capable of. I've never really been a dating app person. I messed around with Tinder a little in college, but it was never serious. After that, I ended up in a long relationship for 4 years, and when that ended, I realized I didn't even remember how to flirt anymore. I didn't have whatever people call game. I just knew I didn't want to sit around feeling sorry for myself. So I started going out more with my single friends and downloaded Tinder again, just to see what it was like as a newly single guy. But when it came time to actually try dating again, the obvious move was to get on one of the more serious apps. Everyone I knew kept saying Hinge was the one, the app people used when they wanted something real. So I made an account and started using it. Within a few days, I had a handful of matches, and one of them stood out right away. Her name was Jenna. She was really pretty, short, dark hair, tan skin, kind of an Italian look to her, and she had that athletic vibe like she worked out consistently. We started chatting, and it felt easy. The conversation didn't drag. It didn't feel forced. After maybe 10 messages each, she asked for my Instagram. She said she hated opening Hinge and would rather talk on there. I figured that was normal, so I gave it to her. A minute later, I got a follow request from an account with a name that looked like Jenna with extra letters and numbers thrown in. Something like Jenna with an X and a bunch of A's. It had around 2,000 followers, followed a couple hundred people, and had 2 posts total. Both posts were mirror selfies. I mean, she looked good in them. They had a lot of likes and comments too. The comments were mostly from guys, the kind you'd expect under that type of picture. She also had a story up, so I clicked it. It was her at the gym, another mirror shot. Right away she messaged me, like she was already waiting. We picked the conversation back up on Instagram and talked about the same stuff. Fitness, traveling, random day-to-day things. We actually had a lot in common, at least on the surface, and it didn't take long before we ended up making plans. It was spontaneous. She suggested we meet that night for a drink at a bar in town. She told me she was in the same town as me, which made it feel convenient and kind of exciting, like one of those random nights that turns into a good story. We agreed on 9 p.m. I knew the bar pretty well. I'd been there enough that I recognized some of the bartenders, and I liked the idea of showing up a little early so I wouldn't be walking in blind. So I got there around 8:50. The bar was mildly busy but not packed. There were open stools, so I sat at the bar, slightly away from other people. One of the bartenders I knew came over, greeted me, and made me an espresso martini without me even having to ask. I took a few slow sips trying to look relaxed and messaged Jenna that I was there and that she could take her time. Then, since I had nothing else to do, I started looking at her profile again. That's when little things started bothering me. I went to her tagged photos. There weren't any, not a single one. I scrolled through the comments on her posts again and realized there wasn't one comment from a woman, just guys, all of them. At first, I told myself it didn't mean much. Some people don't post a lot, some people don't get tagged much, but it still felt odd. Around that time, a guy slid onto the stool right next to me and hit me with a casual, "How's it going?" I nodded and gave him a polite smile, hoping that would be the end of it. I looked back down at my phone, but he kept talking anyway. He asked if I came there often because he said he recognized me. That's when I actually looked at him. He was probably late 30s, a little overweight, with some gray in his hair and a patchy beard that looked like it should have been shaved days ago. I didn't recognize him at all, but I told him I came in once in a while. He stuck his hand out and introduced himself as Rob. In my head, I remember thinking, great, this is exactly what I needed tonight. I shook his hand and gave him my name, just trying to be polite. A second later, the bartender came over and joked with him like she knew him, like he was a regular who didn't always get a drink. Rob did this subtle, awkward laugh, and that made me wonder if he'd been in there already and only came up to the bar when he saw me. I messaged Jenna again, half joking, saying something like, I needed rescuing from a weird guy who was talking my ear off. Then I noticed my earlier message to her, the one saying I was there, had been seen. No reply. I asked if she was on her way. While I waited, I went back to her profile and checked who she followed. That's when it started feeling worse. She didn't follow a single woman, not one, just guys. That didn't make sense to me. Even girls who keep their circles small usually follow at least a couple friends, coworkers, cousins, somebody. Seeing only men felt unnatural, like the account was built for one purpose. Rob kept trying to talk. I finally told him I needed a second and pulled up Instagram's call feature to try calling Jenna. She didn't answer. By then, it was past 9 o'clock. She was supposed to be there. At that point, it wasn't just that I felt stood up. It was that I didn't think she was real anymore. I opened Hinge to check her profile, and sure enough, it was gone. Just like that. I sat there staring at my screen for a second, feeling stupid, and then I asked the bartender for my check. Rob immediately chimed in, asking if I was leaving already and where I was from. I told him I had to go. I didn't feel like explaining anything, and honestly, I was already irritated, not just because of the catfish thing, but because Rob had been so aggressively friendly in a way that didn't feel normal. He kept talking as I paid, telling me I should stay because the hot girls show up around that time. I was short with him, and I'm not proud of it, but if you'd been there and felt how he was pushing conversation, you'd understand. I said goodbye to the bartender, slid off the stool, and turned to leave, and suddenly my left wrist was grabbed hard. It was Rob. His hand was wrapped around my wrist like he was trying to stop me from walking away. I yanked back and snapped at him loud enough that other people turned their heads. I remember the room getting quieter in my ears, like everything narrowed down to that grip. Rob leaned in close and started whispering, making this strange expression, and then he said something that made my skin crawl. He told me he was Jenna. He apologized and begged me not to leave. For a second, I couldn't even process it. My stomach turned so fast, it felt like I might actually throw up right there. I felt dirty, like I needed to scrub my skin, like I'd been tricked into sitting next to him for an hour without realizing what was happening. I ripped my arm free and got out of the bar as fast as I could without running. The drive home was silent. No music, no phone call. I didn't even want to tell anyone yet because it felt humiliating, like I'd walked right into something obvious, and now I had to admit it out loud. I got home, shut the door behind me, and just stood there for a second listening to the quiet of my place like it was the only safe thing left. Then I collapsed into bed and stared up at the ceiling, replaying the whole night in my head. I went on Instagram to block the Jenna account, but it was already gone. Either he blocked me first, or he shut the whole account down. That somehow made it worse, like the evidence had been wiped clean the second I got away. I told myself I'd forget it. I'd laugh about it later. I'd tell my friends the next day. I turned the TV on low and tried to move on like it was just a gross experience. Eventually, I shut the light off, and that's when I remembered why I hate having a bedroom on the first floor. There was a violent bang on my window. It was loud enough to make me sit straight up. My blinds were closed, so I couldn't see outside, and that almost made it worse because all I could picture was someone right on the other side of the glass. I didn't yell. I didn't ask who it was. I stayed completely silent. I stared at the blinds, waiting for another hit, listening so hard I could hear my own breathing. Then a man's voice came from outside, low and clear, saying my name, Scott, over and over again. I didn't respond, but it didn't matter. He knew I was in there. The TV had been on. Even with the blinds closed, the glow would have been obvious through the window. The voice kept repeating my name like he was testing how long it would take before I cracked. It had to be at least 10 times before it finally stopped. I didn't move from my bedroom for the rest of that night. The next morning, when the sun was up and the world felt slightly less dangerous, I forced myself to lift the blind just enough to look. There was a note pressed against the outside of the glass. It said he'd be watching me. I didn't leave my apartment for the rest of that weekend. And a few days later, I moved. I've had a lot of bad dates and awkward moments like anyone else, but that was the first time I realized how easy it is for someone to turn a meetup for a drink into something that follows you home.